Good morning and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM, and this is a show where we sit around, we hang out, and we talk about games. We talk about board games, role-playing games, card games, video games, things that inspire us, things that are beautiful, things that inspire us to be better gamers, players, GMs, and people. Good morning to everyone in the chat with Padre and Grom and John and Mark. Good to see all of you. We were talking about Twilight Imperium before the start of the show in the chat, and I gotta say, it's one of my. I really enjoy Twilight Imperium. One of those games that I need to try the fourth edition. As I was saying, I've also heard Eclipse is a great 4X space game if you are into the Galactic Empires genre of games. The other one that I always want to get to the table, but never been able to, is Lensman, based off of the E.E. Smith novels that kind of inspired the Green Lantern Corps and Asimov and Herbert and Lucas. I think the problem is that if you play one galaxy, I think the game is 2 to 4 hours, and if you play two galaxies, it's a 6 to 8 hour game, and if you play with all three galaxies, it's a 40-hour game. Maybe that's why I can't get anyone to play that with me. Grom, see you in the future. When you come back, Grom, welcome. Timey-wimey, Jeremy Bearimy kind of stuff going on here. Padre, I did not know that they did a Twilight Imperium role-playing game. Is that for Genesis? Genesis? I would assume so because it's a Fantasy Flight property. Yeah, but let's be honest, Savage Worlds is a better game system. It just is. I'm not a huge fan of the narrative dice system, so I'll convert that to Savage Worlds 9 times out of 10. So we're starting a series that's going to go this week and next week, maybe a little longer. People ask me what I do for game prep, and I figured I would take some time and walk through and talk about what I do for my game prep. So I figured we'd start with, as you're learning a new system or prepping a one-shot. And then we'll go into more, adventure prep and campaign prep. But for me, and this is actually super relevant to me because I am learning the Alien role-playing system because next Tuesday, half of my group is missing. And we're going to play Alien for one of the guys' birthdays. He wants to give it a shot. It's his birthday next Tuesday. So this kind of was perfect for me to do this series kind of in parallel as I'm walking through everything that I'm doing. And so what are some things to keep in mind as you are learning a new system? Well, first of all, don't sweat it. At the end of the day, most systems just use different flavors, but all kind of have the same basic components to them. You have characters, you have NPCs, and you have a series of systems to resolve skill checks, combat, and then whatever else the game thinks is important. So Broken Weave has rules for journeys and downtime actions because Cubicle 7 feels like those are important. Dark Souls doesn't, because that's not what's important to the Dark Souls genre. Savage Worlds has some interesting rules for a lot of different situations because it's attempting to be a broadly applicable role-playing game. Going into Alien, I knew they would probably have some sort of horror mechanic, which they call stress. They do. And then you just have to figure out the basic rule, rule resolution mechanic. So, if you've got a starter box, if you've got your intro adventure, if you have your jump start, here's what I do as I'm prepping for a game. And here's the thing to remember. For me, prep is always about two things: shoring up the things I'm not good at as a GM, and giving me what I need to run the adventure with as little reference to the books, or whether they're rules or adventure, as possible. If I can get those two things done, I can walk into a game feeling very confident that I'm going to be able to run my session. So, what does that mean? Well, typically, so I like using lectern journals. You may have your own way of taking notes, and that's fine. But what I like to do is I like to get all of my information on a single spread sheet. Not like a spreadsheet, but a single, 2 pages of my notebook that both face each other. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to, as I'm reading through, touch on the notes that I think I'm going to need the most. How does the die resolution work? So in Savage Worlds, I would, write down, all right, for all tests, trait die plus wild die versus a typical target number of 4. And if I feel like I have things that I need to reference, I may put a page number there. But that's one line on my 2 pages. And why do I keep it to 1 page? Is because I don't want to be able to flip around. I want to be able to focus on everything that I need right here. And what I find is when I'm going through a rule book and I'm writing down the notes that I want to remember, 1, they stick in my head easier. And 2, I get a better grok for the game before I even sit down to roll dice, because I'm trying to sit there and understand and sort of recapitulate and simplify what I'm reading. Same thing goes with adventures. If I'm prepping a module, I want all of the important information for that night on 1 page of paper. Whether that's, so for, excuse me, one of the perils of being live. If I'm running my Savage Rifts game, I have the whole adventure on 2 pages. What I think I can get through reasonably in about a night, night and a half. That includes rules that I may need to reference. So if I'm doing social combat, I want to make sure I have the social combat rules written out there. If I'm doing a chase, have my reference there. Thanks, Mark. And so as a GM, what you're actually trying to do with prep is you can over prep. Trying to figure out every possibility, every thoroughfare, every rules minutia that you may need. And some people prep like that as a GM, and that's fine. But for me, if I can get it all on 1 page, then I'm a happy camper. And we get into campaign design and world design next week. I'm far more of a pre-planner. If I can get a lot of my understanding of the world and the rules and how they all fit together long before I start running my game, then my 1 page of notes is exactly what I need. So what goes on the 1 page? Well, again, rules summaries, NPC stats if you can get them on there. Break down your adventure the same way it's broken down in your quick start, your jump start, your starter box. In this scene, what are the main NPCs, couple of traits to remind them, and what are the important things that the players have to learn in that scene before moving on to the next one. Prepping for a game can feel daunting. It can feel overwhelming. It's one of the barriers to entry for people who want to be a GM. They feel like they're just overwhelmed with everything they would have to possibly put into a world, a campaign, a setting. If you can remember, hey, all I need to do is fill out 1 sheet of paper's worth of notes. If you're great at combat because you're coming out of, say, Dungeons and Dragons and you have been a player and you know how combat works, then sweet. Write your notes to help you with the role-playing side of things. If you're a great improviser, but this episode of Deadlands is going to have a lot of chase, it's going to be set up to have a foot chase or a horse chase, and you're not really sure you understand the chase rules, then that's, a little chunk of your notes. Shore up your own weaknesses as a GM with your prep. So what I tend to do is I'm writing out my page of notes. I tend to break it up this way. Half of the page should be dedicated to the actual session. What are the scenes? What are the important pieces of information? What are the things that get us from one scene to the next? The things I want to highlight. A quarter of the remaining page is what rules am I going to be referencing tonight that I need to have a refresher on or want to make sure at the forefront of my mind. In our Savage Rifts game, it is things like how Detect Arcana works, what weaknesses actually affect vampires, and what things break their immunity. In my Hyperborea game last night, it was how do poisons work, because poisons have a series of events that happen. And for my 13th Age game, I know that game system in and out so well that I'm not worried about the rules side of things. I'm more concerned about, hey, what are some special effects that the monsters have that Gar may have designed that I need to highlight and focus in this fight. And that gives you a quarter of a page for anything else you want. Maybe you put your NPC stats there. Maybe you put a couple of notes or reminders to yourself. Maybe if you're doing an info dump, because the players have just made it to Skyscape and don't know anything about Skyscape, you use that last quarter of the page to say, hey, here are the bullet points of Skyscape and Nixla and the war that's kind of unfolding. You can get that all down to a single page, which usually, for me, takes about an hour. And I'm going to be honest, if you're not... I don't want to put this. An hour's worth of prep for a 3 to 4 hour game is a very low investment, and you'll get a lot of reward out of that. I know a lot of people who don't do any prep, and they fly by the seat of their pants, and that's fine. But I've also seen those GMs really bog down the game when they're like, oh, but wait, I know there was this one rule, let me go look it up. Or, hold on, there was a piece of information in this adventure that you had to have. I don't remember where it's at. Having the book there for reference is great, especially if you write page numbers down in your notes. Oh, hey, this NPC's large backstory is on page 59. I have the small bullet points I want to hit, but I know exactly what page to flip to. Or, hey, the grappling rules are on this page in the Savage Worlds rulebook. Or the sanity loop is found in this page on the Call of Cthulhu rulebook, because I know that the players are going to lose some sanity when they see the Shoggoth. Get your game prep, put in some references so that you can find the pages you need in case you need to reference more as easily as possible. All right, let's see what we got here. Padre, when I was demoing Torg Eternity, I rolled up a player sheet to show them the basics of the game and the mechanics and some extra things to focus on. If you're playing a long-term campaign, or doing what Padre is doing and showing off a game multiple times, I cannot highly recommend enough creating a one-page... Maybe we'll do an episode on this. I will often do a one-page player sheet. One side has the rules that I think they're going to want to reference. So in Torg Eternity, I had a lot of the combat options. Like I had the basics of, hey, here's how a skill check works. Here's what possibilities are used. Here's how cards work. And then here are your things like multi-action, multi-target, called shot, that sort of thing. And then on the other side, give them a one page, and it doesn't have to be the full page. You can add art, mid-journey, stock art, Photoshop, whatever you want to do. But give them an overview of the setting. Something they can always refer to and say, hey, these 10 things are true about this campaign setting. You'll find that your players will, one, reference that a lot, but two, it helps you as the GM to distill what is the most important parts of the setting and the gameplay, which sets you up for success because you know the essence of both the game and the setting. John Doom says, My prep, read what they will encounter in this pre-written invention or on Rails. Make sure that that map or scene setter is ready in Foundry. I will say one of the nice things about Foundry is when your group goes someplace that you didn't expect, while they're talking, I can usually get a whole new scene and monsters set up and input in about 5 minutes. That happened in our Hyperborea game last night. Group went to a temple and ended up having to fight some serpent folk and spitting cobras, and I was like, all right, give me 5 minutes. I had a brand new scene, I had light in there, and I created the 2 new monsters, and I was ready to go. Padre, we're playing Night Train tonight. Oh, the GM Railroad, it's real, Padre. The GM Railroad, especially in Night Train, is very real. What was super helpful, John? I missed that. I printed off the combat option sheet for that. Yeah, 100%. Torg really, really benefits from having those combat options right up front. And yes, building, if you're learning a new system, and maybe we'll do an episode on how I teach myself new systems, I cannot highly recommend enough. Make 2 or 3 characters, pick one of them in a monster, and duke it out. Take a half hour, roll out a fight yourself. You're going to be ready and learn things you never expected about the system. Oh, thanks, John. Like, I wanted to make sure you understood kind of where things were and what was at stake. So it's funny that John and I are talking about this now because I think I have 1 to 2 sections left in my Savage Rifts campaign before we're pausing it. We're pausing the Shadow of Nixla. We're going to go back over and run. John's going to run, what is it? Is it the Skinsaw Murders? Is that the second one? For Rise of the Rune Lords. And then we'll jump back to Savage Rifts after Book 2 and kind of tag teaming this. John, I think if we could plan it better so that I get to run during the daylight saving hours in the winter and you get to run when it's an hour later for me, I think that could be a wonderful team up. So that's it. That's my overview of how I prep for a one-shot or learn a new game system. Next week, we're going to talk about what I do for like campaign prep and then world prep. That'll be the 2 things next week. And then in May, we'll get into some reviews of new Chaosium products. This Sunday, knock on wood, we should be in the studio recording our iconic podcast episodes. So pray that there are no gremlins in the works and we can get through this. So, Padre, I would love for that to happen. I'm currently working on my Crucible Jumpstart, and there will be some play tests that I will be running of that. Also, Dreamshaper wants me to run a Pendragon one shot that we'll be inviting people to, and John Doom wants to play some 13th Age. So, you know, this summer we'll get some one shots in over the over Zoom, and we'll see how that works. See if we can't make some time to get a game in. So yeah, and we're gonna have everybody in studio for the iconic. That's really been the delay in getting more iconic podcast episodes out, is that the group has kind of made the decision we want to play together. So if someone can't make it, we just don't run it. So yes, John Doom, I was going to say I did have a TPK on Tuesday, and I will run that adventure of heading back into the swamp to try and find the corpses of the Imperial Cavalry, which should be a lot of fun. Tink, you were there. You were there the day Horus slew the Emperor. And by Horus, I mean the Hydra, and the Emperor, I mean the party. So that's it. That's it for today. Just hopefully that was helpful to you. That's what I do 1, 2, 3, 4 times a week. Take an hour. I review what's coming up, and I get it all condensed down into one page. So next week we're going to talk about campaign prep. Thursday we're going to talk about adventure prep, like what I do weekly, kind of leading up to the actual session that we're going to play, and then we'll probably do a world design series as well this summer. Talk about Vendom and kind of how I'm able to, what I'm doing for world design there, and hopefully pass on some tips and tricks for you guys. Thanks, Padre. It was the most confusing and epic line to the start of that series. I think Zane I got Zane the first 3, and then I still have First Heretic, which I'm not going to let Zane read for a while. That one's really dark. So, until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. I am JM. This has been Behind the Screen, and I will see you all next week. Until then, have a good one, everyone.